Welcome, everyone, and welcome, Robert.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm so happy that you are here. We had some kind of a lot of email exchange before we could make this happen.
Yeah, we did a lot, and it was because I'm terrible at scheduling.
No worries. Now we are here, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So I would like to start with the question I'm asking everyone who comes to these meetings. How did the book come into your life? How did it all start for you?
Well, I was in my late teens. I had transitioned out of my Lutheran church. I had a lot of questions that I didn't have answers to, and I went on a kind of a search for God. And what happened was, uh, I encountered what I felt. I read very widely, mysticism, comparative religion, parapsychology, mediumship, you name it. And I encountered what I felt was evidence that there was a spiritual reality out there because different people in different traditions in different times in history were were experiencing a similar worldview. And so I thought, well, if everyone's having that experience, where it's all one and our true nature is divine and we're on this journey to realize that, I thought it must be true. So I was involved in spirituality. Specifically, I gravitated towards the Edgar Cayce readings. I don't
Mm,
know if Edgar Cayce is
yeah.
very well known in Sweden. Um, And and then I was at a meeting of local study group leaders, and somebody mentioned that this magazine, Psychology Today, had done an article on the lady who wrote Jesus's Course of Miracles. And I had no idea what that was, and I grabbed the magazine from a coffee table and read the article while we were all just kind of socializing. And I thought, this is right up my alley. Um, that was when I was 20. And then I was a poor college student and I just didn't, go out and buy the book. And my friends got together and got it for me my 21st birthday. And then it was just a long process. I was super eclectic. I really passionately believed that truth was everywhere. That's how I got into spirituality in the first place. Um, but over a number of years, the course just kind of invaded in my life. Um, After a while, I was only doing it, even while I said, well, truth is everywhere and I study many things. I was only studying one thing in the end. Um, and then also, I began to do work for a local Course in Miracles center. Um, my best friend had begun working there, so I started doing projects, and then I started teaching. In the meantime, they asked my wife at the time to work there, so she's working there practically full time. I'm teaching there. The course is gobbling up my personal spiritual time and focus. And I finally just realized, this is my path. And I thought having a path was kind of narrow-minded spiritually. And I wasn't happy with everything about the course at that. I had issues. And yet I slowly recognized, well, like it or not, this is my path. And so I've been teaching since the mid 80s. Um, and I think I love the course more with each passing year, but it did take a while.
Did you study with Ken Wapid? I know I've seen pictures of you and Ken somewhere, and maybe even Helen and Bill.
I never met Helen. By the time when I first encountered that article in that magazine, she was fairly close to death. She would die a few months later. By the time I got the course, she had just died. So I met Bill, knew Ken. I never studied under Ken. What happened was I began studying the course on my own, and I just felt I was reading different things than what I was hearing. Um, and so I began corresponding with Ken in the 80s and saying, "Hey, what I see in the book is different than what I hear you saying." Um, and so from the beginning, I felt like, well, what matters is what the book says. So I didn't have a teacher in that sense. Um, I think if there had been somebody around who I felt was really on track, it would have been great. As it is, I'm still figuring out what the book says. And it's been 40 some years. It's an ongoing process.
I recognize that. Definitely.
Yeah, it's a very deep and sophisticated book.
Yeah.
And our views of it are always going to be approximate.
Yeah. Yeah. So you wrote the Purple, A Course of Miracles.
Well, we edited it and published it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so
So,
so why do we need the purple one? Tell us.
well, what happened was, I don't know how long any of you have been with the course, but back like in the 70s and 80s, we all just assumed that, well, this is exactly what Helen took down. Um, and then in the early 90s, Ken Wapnick's book on Helen Schuckman, Absence from Felicity, came out, and it included a lot of material that no one had seen. And it was a huge shock. I remember, I don't know if you know who John Mundy is. He was one of the very first people to have received the course. He didn't know about this extra material. Um, and so as I encountered that material, I just found it absolutely gripping and priceless. And it really helped clarify and expand my understanding of the course. I didn't feel like it was in conflict, but it was very clarifying. And then in the early 2000s, because of the lawsuits that were going on at the time, early versions of the course began to kind of leak out. And the earliest at that time was what is often called the urtext, and that was the typescript where Helen would dictate by voice to Bill Thetford, and Bill typed it up. I was interestingly just in San Francisco with my wife Emily, and we were visiting with Judy Scutch's daughter Tam Morgan, and she has Bill's typewriter, which is really cool. Um, and so the Urtext, that original TypeScript, leaked out, and I was just floored. There was so much material that got edited out, and there was so much that got changed that stayed in, but it stayed in an edited form. Wording had been changed. Um, and it just seemed like, my goodness, this is too priceless. It's too priceless. The stuff Jesus, I believe Jesus wrote it, as it claims, the stuff he said that didn't make it in was just so priceless. And the way he originally said what did make it in was, in my view, almost always better, clearer, fuller. Um, and so I began to have this growing feeling that this like there's something that has to be remedied here. Like this can't be this way. We had a lot of guidance along these lines, and eventually, um, starting really in 2003, we began to work on the beginnings of a new edition. Um, we didn't get a hold of Helen's notes, her handwritten notes, which are the very original, obviously, until around 2005, I would say, and that really changed things. Because, that is her hearing the voice and writing exactly what she heard. And so we really started in earnest on the editing and transcribing in around 2008. We published in 2017. Um, and it wasn't meant to be some kind of condemnation of the Blue Book. I had used the Blue Book for a very, very long time, right up until our Purple Book came out. Um, but if you really believe these are the words of Jesus, you you want all of them. You want the full picture. Um, and so that's what we tried to provide. We did edit because he made clear that personal material shouldn't be in there. It should basically have a a generalizable quality, as he said, where each person is spoken to. Um, but some of the personal material was so clarifying that we put it in the back in the cameo essays. And the reason that's so valuable is you see him saying, this is how you apply these teachings in this situation and in that situation. And there's no mystery about how he sees you living this course. And in my experience, course students have been confused about that question. How do we apply it? How do we live it? From the beginning. They were confused at the start. They remain confused to this day. And it's all there in the guidance that he gave to Helen and Bill. The whole walking of this path and all its different aspects is present in that instruction he gave to Helen and Bill. There's no mystery about what it looks like to live this. Um, so anyway, we just tried to take those original notes from Helen and put them together in such a way that students had, full access, um, and had some clarification. We included footnotes, as I'm sure you know. Um, they're not there to just inject our slant. They're there to serve the reader in many different ways. So that's kind of the short story. We knew that it could get us into legal hot water. Um, I think if Ken Wapnick had still been alive, that may well have happened. Um, but in the end, it was all fine. We got permission from the Foundation for Inner Peace to use the clarification of terms, which was still under copyright. Um, and it's all worked out exceedingly well. Um, but it was born of that conviction that this has to be out there.
What has it meant for you personally to do this work?
You mean
To do the Purple Book, I mean to do this, yeah, you went so deep into the writings and I just assumed that you were, I don't know, getting epiphanies and insights and change maybe because of the work you did.
sure, sure. I mean, it's just the material in there is an absolute gold mine. So while we were going through the editing process, I would discover things, bring them to classes, use them in my personal practice, and that's still going on to this day. I am so grateful to have that addition. I feel very honored to have been a major part of that. Um, Obviously, the goal was to get it out in the hands of as many students as possible. Um, but the effect that we hear it having on other people is very much mirrored in my own experience. I mean, there's just so much that has been of such benefit to me. And actually, it kind of changed my way of understanding and teaching the course in a way that, that change should have happened a long time before this came out. But what I realized once it came out and I started using it, was the importance of the sequence that he takes you through. The text acts like a series of lectures in a college course. I mean, and it's called a course. Um, and there's a very sequential kind of nature to it in which he's taking you through a process. And my attitude was much more uh, that I mean, I was in a kind of a long transition, but where I came from was kind of like, well, he's kind of saying the same thing everywhere, you know, so you can take any part of it, and he's just saying the same thing. Um, and so what I would do in my teaching is I would mainly take a topic and look at where that topic is mentioned everywhere in the course. I still do that. I love that, but I hadn't realized how much he is like taking you through a linear sequence. And so each section introduces new material, new ideas. Um, and as he introduces the new ideas, he'll reference the old ones. Um, and what that means is any given idea in the course comes in at a certain point and is not referenced much and maybe not at all before that point. And once it comes in, it gets introduced, it gets developed, and it becomes part of the mix. And now it becomes part of the background that new ideas are introduced um, against which, you know, that it becomes the context for those new ideas. And I just didn't realize how much that was going on in the course until we published this book. And so now our teaching at the Circle of Atonement, the organization that I founded and work for, is very much focused on that sequential process, um, honoring the fact that it's a genuine course, educational course.
Mm. Yeah. So, uh, if I understand it correctly, um, the way Jesus taught Helen and Bill in the cameos you have in the purple one teaches us how to apply the course. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's kind of a little different than what I was just saying, but both points are really important. So in that personal guidance, there's no mystery about how he sees us living the course. And also when we restored the original material, which is mostly in the early chapters of the text, it becomes clear that he's laying out this teaching in a sequential way. He's not just giving you the same message on every page. And both of those things are so important.
Yeah. Could you give us an example of a cameo that is in the purple one that teaches us how to apply the course?
Well, I could give so many examples. I think I'll focus on probably my favorite one, and that's Cameo 14. It's called The Chain of Miscreation. And the idea in that cameo is that he has asked them, Helen and Bill, to get together and review the material that he's delivered so far. Okay. Um, and they are now, you know, around the beginning of what we would call chapter 3 in the text. So review the first two chapters. Um, Now that in itself is important because I don't like reviewing, but any course you're trying to learn is going to ask you to review. Reviewing is part of the learning process. And you see that in his request that they review the material up until this point, and you see that in other comments that are made in the early chapters. He wants us to review because this is a course we're trying to learn. Um, and then what happens is their day becomes a mess. It looks like they have a fair amount of friction. It looks like they end the day not too happy with each other. And this review session never happens. Okay. And so what he does is he goes through their day to say where it went off course, and what could have happened. And so he says this is not about anything specific to today. This is just about the typical nature of today. So he says, I'm not going to do this again. And to my knowledge, he never did. But it's so instructive because he goes through all these different things. And what you see in these situations is he repeatedly talks about three things. Okay, one thing is they should have been ideally guarding their minds. Okay. And that means watching their minds for lack of love, for angry reactions, and so on, and then correcting those thoughts. Okay. So the first thing is they should have spent their day guarding their minds. The next thing is they should have been asking for guidance about what to do in situations, even when they're in the middle of a situation and on the fly, like when they're waiting for a taxi. He acts like Bill could have and should have asked what to do. Okay. And one of the things is that Bill had he had been unkind to a coworker, and he's feeling bad about this. And so a cab shows up that is rightly his and Helen's cab, but he magnanimously gives it away in an attempt to kind of make up for how he was unloving towards this colleague, Dora. And but the fact is, they've been waiting a long time, and Helen is really cold, and they're both late. Okay, I think it's the winter at this point. It's not the winter in the north of Sweden, but it's still the winter. Um, and so Jesus says that he's trying to just absolve his own guilt while subtly trying to stick it to Helen with this magnanimous gesture. He should instead have asked for guidance. Um, Another example is that Helen's making a lunch date um, with a couple other people. And she says to the woman she's making the lunch date with, well, I'll go ahead and invite Bill, knowing full well that Bill probably didn't want to come because he was not a super social guy. He probably wanted to avoid the whole situation. Um, but now that the other person knows that Helen's going to invite him, if he says no, the other people will feel snubbed. Okay. Um, and so Jesus says, you shouldn't have said to her that you would invite Bill. You said instead should have asked me what to do. And then I would have told you to invite Bill privately, and then he's not put in a bad spot. Um, so they're supposed to be asking for guidance all day long. And finally, they're supposed to be giving miracles. Now, one of the things that has happened, I think, through the editing, in part through the editing, is that we collectively don't know what miracles are. We've all been saying there's shifts in perception, there's shifts in perception from fear to love. It's an internal thing. And if you read the course really sensitively, and especially if you read the original dictation, and you look at these examples, it's really clear that miracles are interpersonal expressions of love. One person doing something that expresses love to somebody else with a kind, helpful intent. Okay. The Course repeats 6 times the phrase expressions of love to define what miracles are. And we've just lost that, unfortunately. Now, the Course does say that later on it will use the word miracle to refer to something that enters our own minds and shifts our own minds. So that meaning is in there, but it's not the main meaning. Um, and so what you see with Helen and Bill's day, as Jesus comments on it, is he keeps wanting them to do kindnesses,
Mm.
what the Course calls miracles. And it even comes down to courtesy. Now, I don't know what the Swedish word is for courtesy. But in America, you don't think of courtesy as part of spirituality. Okay. Courtesy is so oriented towards the other person, doing small things that are considerate of the other person. Um, so throughout these different situations he reviews, and there's quite a number of them, he keeps talking about basically expressing love, doing kindnesses, being aware of the other person's need, and doing something loving to meet that need. And so what the whole picture is that comes through is that they end up not guarding their minds and having a lot of unloving reactions within themselves. And then they end up not asking for guidance and just doing whatever. And then they end up doing hurtful things. And all of that gives rise to what he calls a chain of miscreation, because those little incidents, they don't end when they happen. They keep going and creating other things in their likeness. Um, and so instead, he's saying, well, ideally, you would have done the opposite. You would have guarded your mind, you would have asked for guidance, and then you would have been able to do loving things, to give miracles. And it's a picture really of the course's path. I don't think it's everything in there, but so much of the broad outlines is right there, and it's incredibly useful.
Definitely. And I feel so inspired to read the cameos again and maybe read it in the group together if people would like to join me. It's very uplifting and very easy to understand.
Yeah. And
What's
I
required
think,
for me, yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just easier to understand what's required for me, my little willingness. How do I
Yeah.
apply it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I was saying, I'll just kind of echo, and that is that we have, as course students, been asking for decades, like, how do I apply this? And it was all there at the start.
Mm,
You can get those same ideas from the rest of the course, but I don't think we've paid enough attention. I don't know what it is. We haven't gotten enough good teaching. Um, but it's really clear in that personal guidance to Helen and Bill. You can't mistake it.
mm, yeah. Um, I'm interested in guidance. Could you speak a little bit more to the topic of guidance? What is guidance in the context of Course in Miracles, and how do you listen to the guidance? How does it work?
Well, guidance is a huge topic in the course. It's huge. Now, I don't know what the perspective that you all have on guidance is. I keep hearing students say, well, we shouldn't ask for guidance because that makes the world real. Um, and the fact is, the course urges us to ask for guidance for all of our decisions, at least as many as is practically possible, all throughout the text. We get training in it throughout the workbook. We're told how to do it in the workbook. And then it's a huge emphasis in the manual for teachers, because the manual for teachers is about people who have assumed some kind of teaching role. Their lives are being devoted to extending these principles, demonstrating these principles, and they're meant to be asking for guidance in everything. So guidance is just one of the major emphases throughout the course. And there is a lot of instruction on how to do it. Um, but the instruction really comes down to, you just open your mind, realize you don't know, quiet your mind, um, ask and ask, trying to ask an open-ended question, because our questions tend to assume our point of view, and that point of view is usually part of the problem. Um, And for that reason, real guidance will often answer a slightly different question than what you ask, because there's something wrong with your question. Um, so we should ask a very open-ended question, uh, and then listen attentively, patiently, listen confidently, because we tend to listen thinking I won't hear anything, right? So we should listen confidently and have an attitude of being determined um, to uh, being determined to hear to the point of refusing not to hear. So our listening should have a really kind of bold, intentional, confident attitude to it. Um, so this has been, well, it's not just a major focus in the course. I've made it a major focus in my own life. And what I will say is like I don't have a particular gift for hearing guidance. You know, I think I'm just right in there with everybody else. And I wish I had more of a gift. Helen had an amazing gift. Bill had a real gift for hearing guidance. Um, but my experience is that people often complain, like, I don't hear anything. And I think you do. I think that if you really ask and quiet your mind, much of the time something will come. And that's my experience. Usually when I ask, I'd say I get something probably two-thirds or so of the time. I don't generally hear words. But what happens for me is when I ask, I get a sense of something, and that sense can be quite specific, and it's often very different than anything I thought before. It has an out of the blue kind of quality. Um, and oftentimes I think I know what the options are, and what I hear will be like not on the list of options. It'll be a whole additional option. Um, and so I think there are signs that there are markers that it's the real thing. My guidance is not perfect. Oftentimes, what it says seems just really unremarkable. Oftentimes, sometimes what it says is proven wrong later on. So I think it's important to have an open mind about what you hear. Um, but the fact is that I lean on it a lot um, throughout the day because it just is better than my own thinking. It's just wiser. It's wiser. It's kinder. It is more principled. Um, it's more elevated. It has a more of a big picture kind of sense. And so, I'm just going through a very, very long process of realizing my day goes better, my life goes better when I do a lot of asking.
And do you do it all the time? Do you watch yourself like a hawk so you can ask for guidance all the time, or do you start with it in the morning and midday and afternoon, or how does it work for you?
Well, I have to say that how it actually works is not as great as it ought to work. Um, so for instance, my day isn't, my normal day is a very imperfect mix of doing it and neglecting to do it. So for instance, the course emphasizes in different places asking for guidance at the start of the day. Um, I I tend to not get anything when I ask at the start of the day. I hate to say that, but it's true. Sometimes I do. I didn't ask at the start of my day today, I'll have to say. Um, but then it also talks about asking when a decision's facing you.
Mm.
Um, and one of the things that I find especially helpful is there's a stretch of about 50 lessons in the workbook where you're supposed to ask for guidance for the coming hour every hour. And that structure of asking about what to do in the coming hour is a really, really helpful structure. Super helpful. So I tend to do a lot of that. I do a lot of asking on the hour. I do a lot of asking when there are things coming up. So, I'll ask about an event like this, like what should be my mindset. for doing this. I have another, as I told you before we started here, I've got a class later in my day. I've been asking about what to emphasize in that class. What's the like what do you want to tell me about that class? Um, and it's just that kind of asking throughout each day that the course wants us to do and trains us to do, if you look at the workbook, and it just makes the day go better. What we do, I think, is we shy away from asking and we give ourselves all kinds of excuses. But I think the big reason is loss of control. When you ask, you're opening it up to anything, right? And what you hear may not be what you want to do. So why ask? I think something in us is like, why do I want to ask? I mean, one of my favorite examples is, I'm not a big maintenance guy. I don't like doing maintenance things. And one time I asked, and what I got, like, what should I do in the next hour? What I got was clean the garage. The garage was a nightmare. Um, and I felt great after I did it, but that's not the kind of thing you want to hear. You could hear anything. Just asking means you're opening yourself up to loss of control, and we all love control. Um, so I think that we are, once we start asking, we are in that thing of, gosh, it goes better when I ask, but oh, I want to stay in control. And I think that push pull is a major issue in walking this path.
And I find myself arguing with the spirit. I'm like, no, I don't have time. No, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Because we hear things that are not from us. They're not the things we
Yeah.
would say.
No, no. And I also definitely feel I don't want to do it. It feels risky and it feels like a stretch and I can't. A lot of that is coming up. How do you handle that if it comes up for you?
Well, I do think, you know, our guidance is imperfect. And we have to realize we don't always hear the right thing.
Mm,
At the same time, what you just said, I can completely relate to.
mm,
Real guidance behaves that way. It stretches you. It feels risky. It feels like you're going out on a limb. And it feels like, hey, that's not the funnest thing. That's not top on my list. Um, and what the course says is that as you do it, it will prove its value to you. So the idea is you learn through applying those times. And you could say like, well, let's put it to the test. I'm going to do this. I'm going to see what happens, and I'll remember what happens. And maybe you do it and you realize maybe your hearing was off, but chances are, you do it and you're like, wow, that went better than if I had just done my usual thing. Like, we all know our patterns, we all know our grooves. We do the same types of things over and over throughout every single day, throughout the year. Guidance has us do new kinds of things. And and those new things can be the solution to the ruts that we get stuck in. They can be the beginning of a whole new life, of a better life. So why not just say, I'll try it out, I'll see what happens. And what the course says is your trust will grow through doing that.
yeah, I recognize that. And also that when I'm willing to do what the guidance suggests, I'm taught something that I really didn't know.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. And I think that it's a real gift that we have access to, but we have to ask.
Yeah.
And it's true, the Holy Spirit is trying to prompt us all the time. I think the Holy Spirit is whispering in our ears all the time. So it's not that we don't have any access if we don't ask, but the asking is so important. And we resist that. We don't want to do it. And so I think that even though the Holy Spirit is nudging us and pushing us and whispering all the time, that asking is so important. It can open up a new life if we will let it. It's a tremendous gift.
Yeah. I work as a nurse, and I've started to apply, asking every shift I start, I ask,
Mm,
how would you like to use me now?
hmm
And I also have a prayer that I would like to see Christ in everyone and to know that they see Christ in me. And it has changed everything at work.
mm,
It's just remarkable to see what I previously looked as enemies. It's like smiling Christ faces now.
mm. How wonderful.
Yeah,
That's really great. And to be able to say it's changed everything,
yeah,
that's what reinforces us and makes us trust that risky, stretchy guidance.
yeah, yeah. Beautiful. How about opening up for more questions from the audience?
Sure.
Sure. So raise your hand, um, either digitally and just wave your hand, and I will put
That's a
you.
real hand there. I forgot what real hands look like.
We have one. Marie was first. She has a real one. So I'll put you here in spotlight. Go ahead, Marie.
There. Hello,
Hi.
Robert, and thank you so much. So interesting to listen. Um, I feel very inspired and I feel very much in this purple book. Yeah, let's do the purple book.
All right.
Yeah. So I have a question, and it's about um, I follow very much when you were talking about a typical nature, a typical day. Uh, how it could look like when from my point of view, I think it was not a good day. And during that day, I realized there was a lot of expression session. So I'm
Can you
thinking about,
clarify what that means?
yes, expression session is just to let it out, whatever is inside to come out. So I have an example. It was with our grandchildren. They had been here for 3 days, and the last day, um, especially with the smallest one, he's 2.5. Uh, we were at this um, bath bathing, where you go and have a bit of swim in a lake,
Hmm
and they were doing things that was not okay. So I felt it like was coming through me, and I had to say no. And he got very angry, uh, but I kept still in my no, and I said, "That's it. We are leaving now." Um, he was angry, and I was just firm in my. I didn't care about what other people were thinking of me. People around in this um, lake who also were there. Uh, it was like there was a coming up from me, whatever needed to be done in that moment, and whatever needed to come out from him in that moment, and also from the other grandchild who's 10 and his friend. I felt it was, I believe it was wrong. It shouldn't have been that way. And at the same time, I felt that it was just what happened. It just came out, the ego thing in all of us. But there was this strong no. It's like expression session. It's not like you were saying, to be kind. Uh, but I was not like angry. I was not afterwards. It was just everything happened in the moment. Um, and afterwards, at the end of the day, when I left, the grandchild who's 10, he said, "I love you, Granny." Okay. So about this, when I believe it's not okay, it's not good, but it feels like it's an expression, so it just has to come out. What is your perspective from that?
Well, first of all, I would really encourage you to read that Cameo 14, The Chain of Miscreation, with this in mind. It's just so priceless. And the focus there is on, like, once we have an angry reaction on the inside, it tends to just reproduce itself first in our behavior, then in, first in the decision we make, what we decide to do, and then in the effect it has on the other person. And it just all goes. What that cameo is talking about, and what the whole course wants us to do, is to be vigilant to the angry reaction on the inside and to use the tools we have from the course to correct that. Now, it may be that you still say no. I mean, parents, grandparents, if you don't say no, something's wrong, right? Um, I've raised 4 kids, and you've got to say no at times. And 2-year-olds are going to be angry no matter what you do. Um, but the no there can be love, and they can feel that love in the no. And that's the most important part of the reaction. Um, so you might have to say, well, we need to go in now. Um, but it can have love behind it. And as I say this, I'm just thinking about, like, my own parenting, and it challenges. I don't have grandkids yet, but it challenges everything in you. Um, so you know, life goes on. We have our reactions, but the course is trying to get us to train our minds to be really vigilant for the angry reaction and to respond to it with the tools we have. And and even once we do, to some degree, dispel that anger, we're faced with, what do we do? And like I said, it may be a no, but what will come across will be different.
Yeah, I'm aware about that it could have been a kind of no. So it was for me to forgive, to come up. And I also the process I'm now in, it's like the people pleasing part of me. It's it's coming off. I'm not this kind people pleasing granny anymore. It's
Hmm.
like no. It's like, and I'm who who is what's going on? What's happening? But
Yeah.
I feel so much more energy. I feel so much more, I don't know, it's like there's something new coming through, but I have to do it's my cleansing. It's like I'm being washed. Uh and and I also understand behind it there is love, all of it, all through it. But I have to do it's for me to clean myself. That's what's going on. Uh,
Yeah, well, I that brings up a lot. I'll just say a few things about it. These days, we get a lot of messages from spirituality, from self-help, that basically say, all you people pleasers, you need to flip over, start drawing some boundaries, protect yourself, be authentic. And I think that, personally, I think that's not the answer. Um, there is a wonderful little discussion in the Song of Prayer supplement to the course. Um, it's in a section called Forgiveness to Destroy, and it's about being a martyr. Um, and the idea in this little discussion about being a martyr is that the long-suffering person who's trying to be kind in spite of all that's being done to them, there's a lot of hidden hate in that. So already there is, in the people pleaser stance, who doesn't say an unkind word no matter what gets done to them, there's already a lot of attack, hidden attack. in that stance. And then what you hear is, oh, well, now stop doing that. Be strong, draw your boundaries. And there's a lot of overt attack in that. And so we kind of bounce back and forth between being this people pleaser with hidden attack and being this boundary drawer with overt attack. And from the course's standpoint, neither one are the answer. Love is the answer. And love is what's missing in both of those pictures. And voices in the world will tell us to go somewhere, and it may not be to a place of love. Love is not a big value in our world, even though we give it a lot of lip service. Another cameo I'd encourage you to read is the one on Mike, and I think it's cameo 24. But in that cameo on Mike, and maybe somebody can tell me if I have the right number there. Yeah. Helen draws a big boundary, but she does it so lovingly. It's just incredible. It's really quite moving how she does it. It's a boundary. She basically says, until you work through your feelings for me, we should not see each other in person, to this guy, Mike. So she sets a clear boundary, but the love with which she does it. And these days, we're told that basically saying no and drawing boundaries and all that is the move for our mental health. That's our own healing. That's our mental health victory. And I don't think it is. I've known so many people who go down that path and they just become really unkind and righteously unkind. And so I feel like ideally, as a course student, you want to get out of both of those modes. You don't want to be the martyr and you don't want to be the boundary warrior. You want to be something else. You want to be love.
Thank you. I feel like tears are coming now. Just loving words.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you, Marie. It's like living above the battleground.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next one is Pia.
Hello, Robert.
Hi.
Nice to see you again. Do you remember me?
Don't know if I do.
From Ulla's course, and I and Staffan drove you to the airport.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, great to see you again. That's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I miss being at Ulla's.
Yeah. And what I was thinking about, what you thought about, talk about this murder. I remember one meeting when we was talking about this archetype. You know the word, Anna? The special personality. What?
Archetypes.
Yeah. And there was, I said that a murder, I am not. It's not in my life. And then, oh shit, English. Mygga, Anna.
Mygga. Somebody else?
Mosquito.
Mosquito.
Okay.
Mosquito.
Okay.
Mosquito was coming. And so there is the murder. So.
Yeah, well, there's the
fine.
murder. And what I find is that we work really hard unconsciously to maintain what the Course calls the face of innocence. And what happens is when people have been with us for a long time, they usually get the murderer within us. They get it better than we do because they're on the receiving end of it. And so I remember one time I heard about some unsolved murder where a woman was really brutally murdered. And the police finally realized, oh, it's the husband. And what they said is you generally don't see this kind of really vicious, brutal murder unless it's the spouse. And what does that tell you? You know, we hide that murderer within us really well from our own eyes, but the people who are on the receiving end of our actions slowly get it. So yeah, I mean it's mosquitoes, but it's also the people in our
Yeah.
lives.
And I have been starting painting, and this with that we don't want to hear the guidance, and we are afraid of really be happy and living in love. I've done a picture. Uh, it's uh, uh, it's from the movie Everything. Um
Life is beautiful, maybe.
no, everything. Uh, everywhere, all at once.
Oh yeah, right. I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that.
So we got guidance, and we say we don't have time because we are living. I can't see now. All the bloody well in my popo life. We like the life we live.
Oh, right, right.
Yeah,
That's English.
because yeah,
Yeah, I can read it.
yeah, because it's my dream. It's my life.
My poo-poo life?
Yeah. Have you seen the movie?
I have. I don't remember that part.
She's sitting outside the laundry, and the tax lady, she said something about this poo-poo life.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's okay, she said.
Yeah. Well, that's our attitude. I don't know if we word it quite like that, but that's the attitude. And we know we're not happy, and yet suddenly in the face of guidance, we're like, yeah, I'm fine. I don't need anybody telling me what to do. All is well, but all is not well.
That's right. Uh, Thanks a lot, Robert, and see you next time you're in Sweden.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good to see you again. Yeah, I
Yeah,
miss those times at Ula's
yeah.
place with the cows next door. I don't know if any of you else have been there, but like there's the workshop space, there's a little window. You look in the window and there's this giant barn full of noisy cows. So anyway,
Yeah,
those were fun times.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pia. Do we have any more questions? All right. It seems like we are done on the top of the hour.
My goodness.
Thank you so much, Robert, for visiting us. So inspiring.
I really appreciate you having me, and I hope this has been beneficial for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it will be a little group reading the cameos from your purple
Mm,
miracles. Yeah.
yeah, that guidance is so priceless.
Yeah, Jeanette has something she would like to say.
I also say moo. We also met among the cows.
All right.
Yeah. And maybe you, Anna, can have some arrangement for Robert to come to Sweden.
Maybe I can. Maybe someone
Just thought.
Yeah,
Does
absolutely.
this is the Swedish organization net, is it a network? Is it still
Yeah,
going?
yeah, it's still going.
That's nice.
It's celebrating 30 years this year.
Wow.
What was it last
Gosh.
year? Yeah, yeah.
That's a long time. We just had the Circle of Atonement. We just had our 30th anniversary last year.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I'm glad they're still going.
yeah. Thank you, Jeanette, for the
Thank you.
inspiration. It might happen, you never know. I will listen to the guidance.
There you go.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful to
Bye-bye.
meet with you.